done the public hearings?
For Parliament, no, not yet. And I'll talk about that. So upon receipt of the documents, each of the committees of Parliament went on their own to start and scrutinize the budget by calling the various MDS. Remember, those same committees again had made some proposals at the budget policy statement level. So theirs is now to confirm whether all the MDS actually conform to the intention of Parliament, as it were, at the point of producing and making recommendations on the budget policy statement. The budget committee now, as these committees are doing their own work, the budget committee goes out there, pursuant to Article 221, subsection 5 of the Constitution, that requires Parliament to go to the public and seek views with regard to the budget for 2025-2026. Those views were taken by the budget committee, and indeed, some of the recommendations made in here are actually from the public.
You know why I'm laughing? That outcry that we have heard from outside, while we're still on that point, that is it true that Parliament, once they come out here and seek for our opinion or views with regards to budget, do they even take into consideration our views? Maybe you can come to us.
Actually, they do. A couple of actually amendments from education, from health, were actually, triggered by the public. Like UHC, you know, we didn't have money for UHC workers. Parliament has added another 5 billion or so, in the budget now. So indeed, we take into account those. So
actually, the demonstrations outside Parliament actually help.
It does by there sometimes.
Okay.
Yes.
So now we have gotten to the stage of public hearings.
Public hearings. So Parliament, the budget committee took the views, and then together with the various chairs of those committees, we sat down and now did a budget and appropriation committee reports, which has a host of amendments, proposals from the public, plus those from now, the views of the MDS through the relevant committees of the House.
That was around May.
May, yes. Yesterday now, the same report was put before the House, and we did something called Committee of Supply. Now, Committee of Supply basically means that the House is supplying resources on behalf of the Kenyan people, through their elected representatives. So they vote every program. Is actually, a question is put on health, specific programs. Actually, they put a question on each of those programs and the votes.
What do you mean when you say programs?
Programs are basically specific initiatives. Each ministry has its own aspirations based on the Vision 2030, the plan of the ministry. So there are specific priority areas which must be voted on each of the programs per ministry. For example, education, for instance, there is, say, maternal health education program. So the question is put on each of those programs in the House. Yes. So the chair of the committee of the whole House in Parliament has to put a question on each of those priority areas. Then the House must vote on it and agree to each of those particular provisions. Yes.
So now we have gotten to the point that Parliament has been involved. At what point, you said around December?
Yes.
Around December?
Yes.
Or October, that Parliament is involved?
From February.
From February,
yes.
Is when Parliament starts
is fully involved.
I want us to understand what comes from Treasury. Is it what is cast on stone for Parliament, or there is room for improvement, room for amendments, room for additions and subtractions? Yes.
You know, the current paradigm shifts post-2010 Constitution. It gives powers to Parliament to make budget. So basically from 2010 onwards, Parliament is a budget-making body, as it were. So as we speak, Parliament has the power to make amendments on the executive budgets. And that is exactly what the Budget and Appropriation Committee has done through consultation of other committees. And therefore, the changes in here reflect the aspiration of the people and the power of Parliament in terms of changing the budget going forward.
Talk to us. What we understand out there is that the country or the government is targeting or is planning to spend a total of 4.2 trillion. There are some billions and millions on top.
Yes.
Is how much exactly is what came from National Treasury, what is on paper now, or did Parliament do some additions?
Some numbers have changed, essentially. Number one is that the current budget that was given to Treasury, from Treasury to Parliament, was 4.239 trillion. 239 trillion. The current budget, as is before the House, is 4.296.
2.96.
Yes, 4.296. An additional 56.9 billion shillings. And those monies have gone to specific areas. Number one, a case in point, we are aware that counties also require some money. So in here, although there are ongoing discussions, the National Assembly has provided about 5 billion shillings provision to increase monies to counties out of the 56 billion shillings. Some money is going to counties. Number two, 21.8 billion shillings is going to roads. You understand the current gap of infrastructure in Kenya. So in the wisdom of Parliament itself, they thought they should increase the budget for roads by about 21.9 billion shillings. UHC workers were clamoring. We added an additional 5 billion shillings to ensure that the people, those workers are turned from stipend to P&P terms, starting 1st of July 2025. What else? Education.
Yes.
There was clamor of money, examination fees not being part of it. We also have tried to incorporate monies in this program out of the additional money raised by the members of Parliament.
By the members of Parliament.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so when Treasury sends its budget estimates to Parliament, there is room for amendments. So what Parliament did with this particular budget is to see the gaps that Treasury had left and added
some money. Mind the overall macroeconomic framework, revenues and expenditure. So this increase is done carefully with the advice of staff of Parliament in terms of what can we increase to avoid, overloading the public into issues of debt burden. So it was carefully actually calculated that within this framework, the only additional we can do is 56 billion shillings, of which 5 billion is for counties, 20 for roads, among other things I've mentioned.
Things you've mentioned. Agriculture is also part of that, what was considered.
Money was also went up, money for seedlings went up. Yes, yes. Okay. Monies for security operations, we've added about 1.8 billion shillings for security operations of our forces.
At what point is this money increased? Is it at the budget, when the Budget and Appropriations Committee is having its meeting, then they come and write a report? Because we saw the the chair of Budget and Appropriations Committee present its report from the committee. Where is this money increased? At what point? Is it at that point, or when you consider it at the Committee of Supply stage, or where? Maybe
Number one, that the various committees of the House, Transport Committee, Health Committee, do their own reallocations and make proposals of gaps. The starting point is that the Budget Committee is not an initiative in itself. They get reports from committees. Upon receipt of those committees, they sit down with the chairs and say, you know what, I think your reallocations are okay, but over and above, we think this area is not sufficiently funded. And therefore, if we raise new money, we put in the following areas. So it's fairly collaborative. One, at committee level. But the last decision is now made by the Budget and Appropriations Committee, which tables the report before the House. That report, because of the new paradigm shift, you must supply money, because Kenyans are represented by members of Parliament. And that's why you keep voting on each of the programs. You must put the question, and the question must be agreed to, that I'm moving money from this area to this area, the House must agree. So Committee of Supply was finished yesterday, which now allows, it's like you're supplying money for spending agencies. On the other hand, of course, now, that money must be financed. Then you'll see now, this afternoon or perhaps tomorrow, you'll see the chair, on Tuesday, yes, you'll see the chair of Finance Committee tabling the Finance Committee report, which is like a committee of ways and means of raising money, right? Yes. But the uniqueness of this year is that, in my view, we don't see much changes in taxes.
You don't see much changes in taxes. I have heard that from the National Treasury CS, indicating that. We shall come to that a bit later. Let me just get this clarification. Are there any changes or amendments that were done for various ministries in terms of allocation during the Committee of Supply stage?
Yes, yes, yes.
That was yesterday?
Yesterday, yes. The money for roads was amended. We need to provide money for dryers, because, post-harvest losses were actually so huge, so money was also put in during the Committee of Supply. We added money for roads of 21.8 billion shillings. We also did what? We also added money for security. Yes, security sector also was added. So during the Committee of Supply, members did agree with the Budget Committee report that indeed these areas were insufficiently funded, and therefore we added those monies yesterday.
All right, so this afternoon, as the CS for Treasury comes to present the budget highlights, it will be the amount that has 59 billion on top.
Exactly.
Okay.
The budget highlights by the CS Treasury is consistent with the House resolution. And I think it's basically he just wants to inform the public of the next path for 25-26 going forward in view of the changes made by the Budget Committee and the House through the Committee of Supply.
Okay.
Yes.
Now we understand, like you said, we understand that that's just the budget highlights. It's like you set aside some planning in your house, and you're like, I need this money to buy this, to buy this, to buy this. Yeah, where will you get the money? So we understand that budget also goes hand in hand with the finance bill. So when are we likely to see, or is the speech for the CS this afternoon likely to contain revenue raising measures?
Yes, and I wanted to say actually that if the budget committee is doing expenditure, the finance and planning committee of the National Assembly was also doing the revenue raising aspects. Remember, the finance bill came in April as well. They've gone around the country trying to collect views in terms of the extent to which the finance bill was burdensome or not. The report in itself contains a host of proposals which must be in line with what the CS is going to read this afternoon. That you know what they propose to do, make sure there is proper tax administration, get to tax people who are below, underground economy and so on. So those proposals by the CS this afternoon are going to be broadly in line with the report of the Finance Committee, which is also likely to be tabled today or perhaps on Tuesday. Yes.
Now we are at we are looking at the finance bill, and I'm sure so many people would like to understand. Like you said, it's a bit slow or a bit down in terms of adding new taxes. Yes, yes. So if we are not going to put more taxes, from where you sit, how is the government going to raise revenues? It's money for the next financial year. Which are the areas that it's likely to target? Yes. I
want to take you back. This is very unique. 2025-26 is a unique financial year in the sense that for the first time in the history of Kenya, that the revenue forecast underpinning the budget policy statement it was higher than what is contained in the budget for 25-26.
Okay.
Why? Yes. Because I think Treasury in their own wisdom realized that they've been over-projecting revenues every year, year in, year out.
Year out, and then they do not
the
reach
actual outcome is not yet.
Yes.
So basically, you realize that the revenues is a shortfall. Parliament itself did accept that indeed this time around, let's have a lower revenue base. And my imagination is that the finance bill for 2025-26 is basically geared towards improving tax administration.
Okay.
So, just basically focusing on the current existing taxes and now trying to get more from the population by improving efficiency of collections, leveraging ICT in everything. That's the point. Okay. So I don't expect the current finance bill before the House by the Finance Committee to have far-reaching measures in terms of tax. I doubt. Maybe
just allow me to put you on the spot on this one. Perhaps you have even had it out there that much as the finance bill does not directly indicate that there are taxes that will be increased.
Yes.
We have other laws.
Yes.
Kuna miswada sheria zingine that chini ya maji introducing the laws that will come for the mwananchi in terms of taxations. Do you agree with that?
I beg to differ. I myself have gone through the finance bill where we advise Parliament, and I can tell you for sure, the only thing that we have done basically is, remember, there's something called tax expenditure. The amount of revenue loss through exemptions is so huge. It's 2% of GDP, is about 400 billion shillings. So every year we lose about 400 billion shillings on tax expenditure. And those expenditures are not passed over to mwananchi. So what the bill has done is to remove a few of the items from exempt to zero rating, from zero rating to vertable.
Okay.
Yes.
Exempting to or zero rating or exempting to zero rating, but there's one maybe you exempt here, but you do a 16% VAT on the other one. So you've exempted on this side.
Yes.
Or you've removed, let's say if it's excise duty, but again there's the VAT that has been increased on that side. Do we have such kind of laws?
I doubt.
The other issue that has been raised, again, maybe you can also help us understand, is that the manufacturer has been targeted in terms of from the manufacturing sectors, but then at the end of the day, the consumer will bear the brunt.
Yes.
Is that part of...
when you go through the schedule of all items that have been moved from exempt to zero and zero to vertable of 16%, I think that's carefully done, and I'm sure the public will be seeing the outcome of the Finance Committee report. I don't want to preempt, but I'm sure they've listened to the public, and those necessary changes, I'm sure, are made in the report, and we'll see soon once the report is tabled.
Okay.
Yes.
I want us to go back a bit on the budget process. Today, the CS is coming to present the budget highlights. when are we like, how does it work together with the appropriations bill? At what point are we likely to see the introduction of the appropriations bill? Yes.
You know the current system, the role of the CS Treasury is to come and inform the public on the policy priorities of government for the next year, which is 25-26. However, nothing is secret anymore. The House is already done with supply. Today and tomorrow, we are in the process of publishing the appropriation bill. So by next week, we'll have the bill in place. So basically, the CS wants to inform the public that, you know what, all this time from August through parliamentary process, these are the policies of government of the day. There's nothing new. Unlike before, where, you know, he used to come with a briefcase pre-2010. He will hide, people will even hoard things, you know. The transparency around the budget is very clear under Article 201.
Under Article 201
of the Constitution, yes.
I would also like to understand, or maybe we can help our viewer also understand in terms of, we have the Committee of Supply, which you've said has supply. Then we come back and look at the appropriations bill.
Yes.
Appropriation, supply, maybe you can try and
the link.
Between the two.
So the House, once the House supplies resources through a House resolution, that resolution is taken back to back and is legislated by now, publishing the bill. So when you take the Committee of Supply report of the House, compare with the bill, it is back to back. So basically the supply resolutions are now legislated by passing appropriation bill for 2025-2026, which is required to be passed, to be signed by law on or before end of this month.
End of this month.
End of this month.
That will also help in that. Actually, that is what will be the framework for appropriating the monies.
Exactly.
So the monies that will be appropriated is what we have already seen. For instance, we understand the report of the budget committee had indicated that, let's say for the examination, 5.1 billion, 5.9
shillings, yes.
So that one is already there.
Yes.
So when it comes to appropriation now, we're like, this money.
You'll see. It's going for this purpose.
All right.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the CMS twin between the budget committee and the finance committee, and that's why perhaps today or Tuesday, the finance committee must be able to table its report because they are raising money. So once the two documents must be tabled nearly together to see how the figures are balancing. In the event the finance committee has far-reaching consequences of reducing the revenues, then we have no choice other than revising the same figures in the appropriation bill. Yes.
Let's talk about the two bills, appropriation bill and finance bill.
Yes.
Appropriation is supposed to be done by the end, before the end of this month.
Yes.
Finance bill is around September. We need to be.
No. The new law requires that you pass the finance bill and appropriation bill on or before end of June every specific year. What
are we likely to see happening in the National Assembly next week with regards to those two bills?
Number one, next bill, of course, next week, we will suggest that perhaps they start with the finance bill, look at the host of measures proposed by the finance committee, pass it, right? We see the revenue impact, then now subsequently pass the appropriation bill. Okay. So in our view, the appropriation bill must come after the finance bill. But surprisingly, remember I said that unlike before, the total revenue yield in this finance bill, the way I look at the numbers, I don't see anything more than 20 billion.
More than 20 billion.
And that's why I'm saying that unlike before where we used to raise 200 billion shillings, this finance bill is just about cleaning up and making tax administration easy to implement the digital economy, you know, the underground economy, people who have...
We'll take your word, but when we see things different out there, of course, we shall come back to the platform and say, why did you not tell us exactly what was going to happen?
I think history will prove me right.
All right.
Yes.
Okay, we hope so. Maybe as we wind up, we have also seen that government is planning to reduce on external borrowing and more of internal borrowing. Maybe you could just kindly explain to us exactly how that will work with the manufacturing sector and all the other sectors, or even investors in the country.
Yeah, the intention of government is to reduce, both domestic and external borrowing. And I'll say this, the current deficit in the budget is 4.7% compared to 5.6% for 24-25. So there is a slowdown of deficit, meaning that they are trying as much as possible to reduce borrowing in general, right? However, given the external environment as we speak, Treasury has carefully perhaps, considered the external environment against domestic environment, and the numbers is about 60% domestic, 40% external. But I think over the medium term, the intention is to reduce domestic borrowing slightly up to the next 3 years. You see slowing down because when you borrow so much in the market, probably sometimes it chokes the private sector in terms of getting the same resources they are competing with. Okay. So you look at their tables in the medium term, there is a slightly slowdown of domestic borrowing. Yeah. Okay. Ideally relying on revenue mobilization. In the long run, that should be the only recourse for this country.
Okay, we shall leave it at that now. I would have wanted to ask maybe why would we need supplementary budget? Where do these supplementary budgets come in after a whole years of planning and saying we need this money? Then we see supplementary 1, supplementary 2, supplementary 3. Maybe as we went up, if we could do it in 1 minute, why exactly do we need supplementary? Why exactly?
One problem. Revenue forecast.
Okay.
You get your revenues wrong, you have to revise the budget downwards.
Okay.
But this year, given that the revenues seem realistic, we hope and pray that 25-26 we'll have very few supplementaries going forward.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Masinde,
for
the insights. Actually, I have learned a lot, and I've actually, I can be an expert now. Maybe if you could do an interview with me to try and explain to you on that. But that has been Dr. Masinde, the Director, Parliamentary Budget Office, of course, giving us the insights into the budget process, what we're expecting this afternoon, what it means for the country, as well as what comes next. Finance bill is coming next week, so we shall be here to try and see how all that is taking place. But again, we will understand that the process has not, where we are right now, we are going to see the budget highlights from the CS National Treasury. And as Dr. Masinde has indicated, it's a process that has been on for a whole year, from August last year all the way to now, and we are not done yet because we still need the appropriations bill and we also need the finance bill for the whole process of the 2025-2026 financial year to be done. So what we're expecting to see this afternoon is to understand more from the CS, and of course to be able to understand how the revenue raising measures are. But of course we understand that the budget process has been done by the National Treasury alone. National Treasury has been working hand in hand with the Parliament, specifically National Assembly. And of course, we understand that there are a number of committees. One of the most crucial committees in this particular budget process is the Budget and Appropriations Committee. And I will be joined in a few minutes. I will be joined by the chairperson, Budget and Appropriations Committee, Honorable Samuel Atandi, who will of course shed more light to us on exactly what changes or amendments they made from the budget estimates that came from the National Treasury. Remember, what we have heard from Dr. Masinde is that there were amendments, there were additions of some money. So we want to understand exactly how did they come about with this, why they felt it was important, and how they will, or rather, did they also try to consult? Were there consultations with National Treasury? Or what came from National Treasury got some amendments from the National Assembly and that was final? Or how are they working hand in hand with the National Treasury? Remember, this is a unique production that we are doing for you from the Parliament buildings as we await for the budget highlights from the CS Treasury and National Planning. This is the maiden, or if you like, the inaugural budget by the Honorable CS John Mbadi. This will be his inaugural budget highlights that he'll be making in Parliament. How different will it be? Of course, we have already heard how different it is. So allow me now to bring on board the Chair, Budget and Appropriations Committee, Honorable Samuel Atandi. How are you? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Shukran sana for joining us here.
Thank you very much.
This is our own unique bench here at Parliament.
Thank you.
All right. So maybe to start us off, how easy was it for you as a committee, perhaps, to consider the budget 2025-2026?
Thank you very much. First of all, let me thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you on the budget process. I've been in budget committee since I joined Parliament in 2017. So I have been familiar with the budget process, and there was nothing really unique about this one. It's the same process that we have done, because we have universal guidelines on how budget is done and how the consultations we need to make towards budget making, which includes public participation and engagement with the various government agencies that implement the budget. So we did that successfully, and we went to many counties to talk to Kenyans about their expectations in the budget. So I think the process was seamless, and to date we have done a very good budget that is very consultative. And as I assured the Kenyans when I took over as chairman, that one of the things I was going to ensure was to ensure that there's equitable distribution of resources across the country. I want to confess that we have done that by and large, yes.
Now, talking about the equitable share, or rather how you did the budget, the equitable budget, one of the things that I heard from the members of parliament as you had presented your report was that the budget was balanced. What exactly do they mean by the budget being balanced? You have been a member of the budget committee, as you said, throughout your parliamentary terms. When they say the budget is balanced, where were we going wrong initially and how is it balanced now?
Balanced, it means that the projections that are in the budget are realistic. Okay. For example, one of the areas that affect our budget making process is that we normally do not project revenues accurately. Sometimes we say we are going to collect, let's say, 2.5 trillion, but in the end we collect less. So this time around, I think we have been more realistic about our revenue projections. Normally, Treasury projects their revenues, but we also, as in-house, Parliament in-house, we are bound consultants, experts. The Parliamentary Budget Office consists of many fiscal analysts and economists who also basically can write the whole budget on their own. So when they look at the economy, they also make their own projections. For the first time, Treasury has projected revenue less than what we have projected. In the past, normally, Treasury would project revenues at a certain position. Then when the report comes, our own parliamentary team says, that is over projection. But for the first time, what Treasury projected is less than what we projected. So, and normally, our projection is always accurate. What we project as Parliamentary Budget Office, in the end, is what normally KRA collects. So we think that the budget is balanced because it is falling within our realistic projections of revenue. Yes.
You say what Parliament projects is what KRA collects?
In most cases, what Parliamentary Budget Office projects, in the end, is what normally KRA collects.
KRA collects.
But in the past, Treasury projects higher than what KRA normally can achieve.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So what are the projections for this year, maybe for the benefit of our viewer?
Yeah, Treasury projected in terms of ordinary revenue, Treasury projected 2.74
trillion.
Yes. But Parliamentary Budget Office projected 2.77 trillion. So you see, it's less.
It's less.
Yes. So we think that that is fair and realistic projection.
And that is what we shall go by, or the government shall go by.
So budget making is the work of Parliament. When what Treasury brings to us are just proposals.
Yeah, yeah.
So it is now what we present. That is now what is the budget. So, but the proposals from Treasury are what forms our benchmark for budget making. So we did not tamper with it much. From what Treasury projected, we increased the final report by about 10 billion upwards in terms of revenue.
In terms of revenue.
Yes.
Perhaps, so which figures is the Cabinet Secretary for Treasury this afternoon going by?
He's going by our figure. Because
which is?
Our budget.
Yeah.
Remember, we went through the budget and tabled our budget.
Yes.
Which we went through up to yesterday, but we did Committee of
Supply, yes.
Now, that is the report that he's going with. Because that is the actual report, that is the budget. He cannot come with a budget which is not in our report. Because if he makes a proclamation about an expenditure, and it does not into account what we have done as Parliament, then that cannot work. So what is coming to highlight is the budget that we have done as Budget Committee and we have passed on the floor of the House.
And at what point did you decide that this money has to be added? If the estimates that came from National Treasury were a bit lower and National Assembly amended or committee amended and raised it, what informs that particular amendment?
The other pressing budgetary needs. When Treasury brings their budget to us, we also go out and talk to Kenyans and talk to many other players, including government agencies and departments. And then we look at other pressing needs that may have not been captured in the proposals from Treasury. Now we have to find a way of how we can address them. Like, for example, remember when the Treasury estimates came before us, they did not factor in examination fee. And when we spoke to Kenyans told us that is something that they would like to have in the budget. So as Parliament, we have to find a way of appropriating resources for that particular one. Also, you saw health workers were on the streets.
Yes.
And they came here several times, yes.
Several times, yes.
So again, as a listening Parliament, we had to do something. So we have to find a way of raising more revenue within the scope, within the framework, to address some of those challenging needs that may have not been captured in the treasury proposals. Yes.
Yeah, actually that reminds me of the concerns that Kenyans usually have out there when the committees of National Assembly or Parliament do public participation, and then at the end of the day, we ask ourselves, have our views, have our opinions been actually considered? But what we've told us actually shows that which specific areas maybe saw the additions or received maybe the additions in the budget?
Largely across the board.
Okay.
We had additions in the infrastructure. There are some areas we went to, we found a need for certain projects, infrastructure support like in roads, that we could not wait. So we added money in the road sector, in the health sector, in the agriculture sector. Yeah, like when we went to Rift Valley, for instance, and even Nyanza and Western, most farmers, they want to diversify. They want to move from traditional crops they have been doing. They want to go to coffee and other areas. So we consider that we need to support those initiatives, so that those farmers can be able to go start doing projects that are crops that are profitable. Then, of course, when we dealt with other things like land, you know, you have seen a lot of land crisis in the country, where people are fighting for settlement schemes. So we also listened to them and said, let's allow Kenyans to settle. Let's look for money and provide for those votes. So we did the balancing across the board.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. So we are looking at a budget of 4.2 trillion. Yes. And the additions that you put, because it was, so we can just say it's 4.2.
Is what makes it 4.2 trillion.
4.2 trillion.
Yes.
Last year was about 3.9 trillion.
We started at 3.9 trillion when we, after the Gen Z protest.
Yes.
You know, the budget came down to 3.9 trillion.
Yes.
But you know, we have been doing, subsequently, we have been doing supplementary estimates.
Yes.
So largely, by the end of this year, our budget probably would be about around 4.1.
Okay.
If you look at the totality of the budget, including the two supplementary estimates which we have done, the budget has substantially grown to about 4.1 trillion. So if you look at that, where we are going to close the year on 30th of June, vis-a-vis where we are starting, the difference is not very much.
It's not very much.
Margin is very small.
But again, we also need to take much concern on also the budget ceiling. I don't know whether this one you are a bit keen on, also not to go too high. We have already surpassed. But again, how do we go about it?
Yes, we were very keen. In order to start the budget off at 4.2 trillion, there are so many things that we have to cut off.
Yes.
Like, you know, unnecessary expenditures, including travelings. We have addressed that. We have looked at the budget in totality and tried to remove all those unnecessary expenditures. We wanted to focus more on development vote, because as you have seen, development vote as presented by Treasury was about 707 billion, but the final report is about 721 billion. So we were trying to balance off and try to put more money on development. But did we achieve it still? Yes, we did. We have grown the development vote from 707 to 721 billion. We've grown it by about 15 billion. 15 billion? Yes,
Oh, right.
Just by reallocating resources. And taking off resources from other sectors that are not necessary. Okay,
but still our expenditure is still high compared to the development in terms of percentage.
Expenditure is, yes, because you see, out of a 4.2 trillion budget, development takes 720 billion. The biggest expenditure actually is debt repayment. Because interest on debt alone is about 1 trillion. So that's the biggest problem actually. That's the biggest problem. In the budget. Okay,
so now we talk about debt, and I understand that you now want to reduce external borrowing. This particular next financial year, the budget targets to reduce on external borrowing and focus more on domestic borrowing. Is that the case?
I don't think that's the focus. The fiscal deficit of about 867 billion will borrow about 500 billion locally and 277 billion externally. It does not mean that we are focusing on local domestic borrowing. We are just balancing the debt portfolio, because you cannot have a debt portfolio where you are borrowing everything from external. External could have some challenging factors. Because
I'm looking at it from the angle or from the point of, if we do external borrowing and we go the concessional way, and again we realize, the one of commercial or concession, maybe we can try and one of it has the higher interest, and we are now dealing with debt repayment, which has taken much of our expenditure. Are we coming locally? Are we doing domestic so to try and, go out of that?
Also, there are two types of loans. There's multilateral and bilateral.
Yes.
Most of the countries that are supporting us, like US, basically through World Bank and China, they're also facing their own challenges. So they may not be able to give us resources that we need. The other option left is commercial loans. Commercial loans are very expensive. It's the problem we're having. The composition of our loan is such that commercial loans are so high.
Okay.
So we want to avoid commercial loans.
All right.
In as much as we can. Because if the room provided by World Bank may not be enough to satisfy our local. In fact, if you look at our projections, our estimates, we are not projecting anything to collect to get any loan from IMF.
Okay, really? Okay.
So there will be a balancing act. And we think that our economy can support 500 billion borrowing.
All right, okay. So that maybe to our last question is with regards to the budget as you have it and the revenue raising measures. You work hand in hand with the finance committee.
Yes, yes.
Questions out there is, with this budget and with the revenue raising measures, how is it going to affect Kenyans? Are we likely to see new taxes?
Yes, I know that there's a lot of misinformation about the finance bill.
Yes.
What we must highlight and emphasize is that this finance bill, which is coming up, has not affected taxes, largely has not affected taxes. If you are in employment, your pay is not going up. Yeah. If you are in business, we are not increasing VAT anywhere. Yeah. What this finance bill is trying to address is, one, to bring more people into the tax bracket.
In the tax base, yes.
Yeah, because there are so many Kenyans who are making money, but they are not paying taxes because we don't have systems to bring them on board. So I think this finance bill is largely going to do that. Also, it's going to try to, seal tax leakages, through reforms that are being set up for KRA. For KRA. There are some reforms that are proposed to ensure that at least Kenyans do not evade tax. Okay. Tax evasion and tax avoidance are some of our biggest problems. So if we can bring more business people, yesterday I was with some lawyers, they told me they don't pay tax. And legal sector is one of the most profitable sectors. Yes. If you look at the people paying taxes in that sector, there are very few, and many other areas. Okay. So I think the problem is, let us bring those people on board. And then we are going to increase our tax base. Okay. Thank you so much, Chairperson. Yeah. Thank you. It was a pleasure getting some insights from you with regards to the budget process, as well as what changes have been done to the budget, and also what we are likely to see this afternoon as the CS National Treasury National Planning is coming to give the budget highlights. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. So, well, that's it from me. My colleague Gladys Mungai is standing by, just about to join me. Of course, this conversation continues. Remember, it's a day that has been set aside for you to be able to understand the budget process, the highlights, what's in for you, the appropriations bill, finance bill, and all the rest. So for now, it's bye from me. My name is Kamche Menza, but I want to engage my colleague Gladys Mungai first before I leave the set for her. Hi, Madam Boss Lady. Karibu sana. This is our bench, our parliament. You see the garden. How do you feel the sun? Yeah? Sure.
Yeah, the sun is absolutely amazing. It's a beautiful day, a day when Kenyans expect to see and to hear what the new, I'm still going to call him new, even though he has served for a number of months in the treasury docket. He is the first cabinet secretary who happens to hail from Nyanza region, and this is a cabinet secretary who has brought out his stand against introduction of new taxes and increase of taxes. So I think among Kenyans, we are waiting to see what the cabinet secretary for the National Treasury will be telling Kenyans about the issue of taxes and revenue raising measures.
So basically, right now, I think I need to be stepping out to give you the set for you, to leave the set for you. It has been a pleasure to host the two experts on matters budget and parliament. But for now, my name is Kamche Menza. I will be leaving you with this beautiful lady, my colleague Gladys Mungai, to take over as we try to make you understand what exactly entails in the budget process. Bye-bye for now.
Thank you, my colleague Kamche Menza, for that insightful interview, engaging experts on matters budget 2025-2026. I'll be joined in a few seconds. You can see him on the screens. The Honorable Member for Kitui Central, Honorable Makali Mulu, a budget expert, so to speak. Honorable Makali, welcome so much on our set. This is Parliament Buildings. This is our set today. And this is not the first time you and I are engaging on matters budget. And you've spoke insightfully on a number of issues. I'm still going to ask you the very first question I usually begin with when we are having an interview. Do you believe we are coming from 3.9 trillion shillings budget to now 4.2 trillion shillings budget? And my very first question to you, Honorable Member, would be, do you believe that this budget for the 4.2 trillion shillings caters and reflects the interest of the Kenyan mwananchi?
Let me say this, to a large extent, it caters, but as you said earlier, being a budget expert, I would be looking at the budget from three perspectives. The first perspective is it a pro-mwananchi budget? The second perspective is it supporting our private sector to grow, so that in that case you can get more jobs and get more taxes collected? And the third perspective is it a more executive-oriented budget? And from those three perspectives, I could be concluding that if we were to rank them, it's more of an executive-oriented budget as opposed to a pro-mwananchi budget. Why am I saying that? If you are to tease out the issues which directly affect mwananchi, you realize that there are not as many as the things which have been done by the executive to what is the right term? To appear like the executive is working for the normal Kenyans. So, but I'm sure since you have just interviewed my chairman, the chair of budget, I would want to focus more on areas of what needs to be done to this budget so that it assists the mwananchi. There are a few things which must be done so that the budget becomes more from mwananchi budget. You know, if you look at the budget, these are more proposals. And we have realized over time that we have serious challenges with budget implementation. And so long as you're not going to implement the budget, it's going to be a problem. So the first issue, which I would want really has to address as a country, if this budget has to help mwananchi as expected, is the issue of the exchequer releases. You realize that over time, we do budget, but when it comes to implementation, there are challenges in terms of release of money to the departments, ministries, and agencies. So long as that money is not released by treasury, automatically the budget will not be implemented. And if it's not implemented, then the expected mwananchi who is expected to benefit will not benefit. The second matter, which is critical, is, and this issue of exchequer is closely tied to revenue of projections. You know, every year we would say we'll collect this much. So on the basis of that, so long as we don't collect as expected, then we'll have shortfalls. And if you have shortfalls, then you can't release to the MDS. So one of the things as we address the issue of exchequer releases, we must also be realistic in projecting our revenue collection so that we don't have those gaps. The second issue, which is critical, and we must do as a budget, when you quickly review the budget, as it was presented by the executive and as analyzed by the departmental committees, you realize, I think there's still room that we could do a bit of expenditure rationalization so that there are few things we could get out of this budget and still achieve the same outcomes without really losing anything. And the good thing by doing that is you might be able to release some resources from our own source so that you borrow less. And I think that's a serious matter. So I would say as we move to the future, I think departmental committees of Parliament and the Treasury, who initiates the budget, need to do much more looking at what are we spending our resources on. And that could give them room to save some money and to reduce the budget.
I think I'll be spending a few more minutes
on that
on that issue.
Yes.
And when you say we need to rationalize the aspect of expenditure. We've had a situation where we have monies coming through supplementaries 1, 2, and 3,
yes,
and the overall budget.
Yes.
But we've been having various state agencies saying that
yes,
a chunk of the allocation is going to salaries,
yes,
and there is very little for
yes,
development.
Yes.
How then do we bridge the gap between ensuring that we are catering for the services that they are paid, the services of those offering services, the employees and everything else. And at the same time, the normal Kenyan does not suffer in terms of delivery of services being hindered by the aspect of underdevelopment.
Exactly what you have said is what the problem is. That when we are, like now if you go to the budget, you realize we have about 700 billion targeted to development. But I can tell you for sure, by the time we hit the second or third supplementary of this financial year, we'll have reduced that amount to about 400 billion. And these are the challenges that when you are budgeting, you are very clear where you want to go. But as you implement, because of the challenges of not raising the adequate revenue, then you start bringing development back. And the area which suffers most has always been development. And what we forget is, so long as you don't do development, then you don't grow the cake. And that's why you see over time, our fiscal space keeps on shrinking and shrinking. And I think we need a situation where this thing we call fiscal consolidation, I think we need to take it more serious than we are doing. Because over time you realize we keep on, because what has happened, any time we are not able to raise enough money, we borrow more. And that's why you see like now, if you look at the budget, we are targeting to borrow 876 billion, yes, which translates to 4.5% of the GDP. But I can tell you for sure, when I'm seated here, by the time we reach June next year, we'll have gone above 5%. Meaning, we'll be borrowing more because you're not collecting more. And that's why I was saying, we need to be more realistic in terms of what can we collect, so that even as we budget on the basis of what we have. I think that's the area I was saying we could look at some of the expenditure items. And another example I want to give you. For example, the Auditor General, when we are doing the budgets, he did indicate to us that for the last 3 years, Kenya has spent about 6 billion paying commitment fee. And for this particular year, as at now, 2024-2025, we have paid 700 million commitment fee. Commitment fee, Gladys, is money where you have taken loans and you are not drawing the money, the loan. So long as you are not drawing that loan, because it's already committed to you, then you pay commitment fee because it cannot be given to somebody else. So you can see, for the last, for the last 11 months, we have done 700 million. For the last 3 years, we have done 6 billion. Imagine what 6 billion can do. So we are saying, if we are to get it right in terms of doing feasibility studies and being ready to take our loans and use them, we can easily save 6 billion. So that's why I was saying, there are areas I think, if we're really serious, as a country, we could save some more money and reduce the borrowing. So the third issue I wanted to mention in terms of getting it right so that the budget serves us was the issue of the public debt. Public debt has become a major challenge. I
was heading to that. Before we get to that, Honorable Makali Mulu, yes, you've spoken about the issue of commitment fees.
Yes.
And my question that will be tied to that,
yes,
we've had President William Ruto,
yes,
saying that moving forward, he's working towards having the country borrow less.
Yes.
Externally.
Yes.
The external borrowing is supposed to come down significantly to some levels. And I want to understand, I've spoken to a number of your colleagues today, we've been interviewing them for the better part of this morning, and their thoughts seem to align to that. And when you speak about commitment fees, about the country committing some fees, yet we cannot, it's like a security.
No, we can't draw the money.
We can't withdraw the money. How do you see this, like the aspect of, like, when we're moving forward, the aspect of external borrowing versus internal borrowing?
Yes.
I understand the CS in his budget today is supposed to highlight that aspect, how the government, the revenue raising measures, how the government is planning to borrow externally versus internally to reduce the aspect of interest charged on loans.
Yes. Now, what has happened, if you look at our total public debt portfolio, we are at 11.6, around 11.5 trillion. Out of that 11.5 trillion, for the first time, many years we have been doing higher in terms of external loans as opposed to domestic loans. But for the first time, now we have about 52 domestic, 48 external. So the tables have been turned. What are the disadvantages of doing that? The disadvantages, external loans would normally be concessional loans. So they have low interest rate and they have long repayment period. Domestic loans are high interest rates, shorter repayment period. So anytime you have more domestic loans, it means you'll be paying high interest and you'll be paying within a shorter period. Now, normally what would happen is, as you calculate your interest, you realize that then you start spending more paying interest on domestic loans as opposed to external loans. And that's why you hear we keep on saying 70% of the 1.1 trillion we have put for repayment of interest will be paying for domestic loans. And to make it worse, anytime you do more domestic borrowing, then it is a government competing with the private sector, borrowing locally. Because one of the challenges of the private sector is access to credit. So when they start competing with the government for the same credit, automatically the government is a better borrower compared to private sector. So you deny the private sector that chance to borrow. When you deny them the chance to borrow more, you deny them the chance to expand their businesses, and by doing so, there are high chances that they might have started laying off employees. If that happens, then the economy suffers. And you know, this is a basic principle. The private sector is the sector which drives the economy. The other thing which happens is, anytime you borrow domestically, then the other thing will be like now the central bank has been reducing the base rate, but the private banks have not been coming down. Yes. So you see, Kenyans are still borrowing at higher rate as compared to the central bank rate, and that's another thing. So you realize at the end of the day, there is what we call credit squeeze, and so long as you are not exposing, people are not able to access credit and cheap credit, then the economy is not likely to grow as expected. So these are some of the issues. And then the other issue of the public debt is, what I wanted to say is, we have been talking all along about the single treasury account. Now, the single treasury account is supposed to be a very good cash management program or scheme. What it does is to make sure that any money, government money, is in one account for purposes of managing the cash flow. What is happening now, you go to the parastatals, you find a parastatal like NSSF, or let's take a typical parastatal like SHA now. You find their money, they are put in treasury bills and bonds. And then the government sells those things to SHA. So the government is paying SHA interest for the bills and the treasury bills and the bonds. But what is happening? SHA is using government money to buy the same. So it is government borrowing government money and paying interest. If we had single treasury account, this money will be knowing SHA has 3 billion, but the government will be able to access that money without paying any interest. So that's why you see we have been insisting, can we move to a single treasury account? And that is one thing I'll be listening to here, whether the CS Finance today will tell Kenyans what time frames is he going to implement that particular single account. Because implementation of that account will help this country in terms of cash management and ensuring that the government does not borrow from itself and paying interest.
You've spoken very well, the aspect of having a single account. But then again, you've been in the budget committee for quite some time now.
Yes, yeah.
I would probably want to understand from you, or a normal Kenyan would want to understand from you, having this kind of thought, is it an idea you have fronted before, and what was the reception?
If you look at our reports as a budget committee, and more so now, we have a committee called Public Debt and Privatization Committee. If you look at our reports for the last 3-4 years, that matter of single account, as single treasury account, has been one of our constant recommendation from Parliament. And it is always adopted by Parliament. But implementation is where we have a challenge. And it's just not that one. We have made very good recommendations to do how we can improve our financial management as a country. But implementation is never done. And that's why we are thinking that now that Honorable Mbandi, who we have been championing these things together when he was in the House, and is now the CS Treasury, will take this opportunity and implement what we have always been championing for. Because from where we sit as experts in this area, these are things which can help the country manage our resources prudently, and at the end of the day, be able to push the economy up, and Kenyans will have more money in their pockets so that we grow everybody in Kenya.
Honorable Makali, let's talk about the aspect of borrowing and the debt ceiling.
Yes.
We are currently at 11.5 trillion shillings.
Yes.
And I think moving forward for the next few years, before the economy recovers fully,
yes.
and we are not in a situation where we need to borrow
Yes.
from the big boys,
Yes.
the IMF and
Yes.
the African Development Bank.
Yes.
We need to ensure that our systems are working and everything else. So my question would be, how do we ensure that there is prudent usage of resources? Because as it's not a situation where the country does not have resources, but we encounter a situation where we have misuse of
true.
public monies. How do we ensure that monies that end up in a few persons' pockets are used to finance key development agenda for the government?
Glandis, what you have said is very correct, and this is not your statement. It's also, that statement is confirmed by the Auditor General, who has the constitutional mandate to look at the books and confirm where money is going. And the Auditor General has said about a third of our budget is either misapplied or misdirected. Implying we could easily have $1 trillion if we were to sort the issues of misapplication and misdirection. But what is happening is that we are not doing it. And that's the question you're asking. What can we do? There are a few things you can do. And I think the Auditor General said, every report of the Auditor General in this country has very clear recommendations on what needs to be done. That report comes to Parliament, and through the Public Accounts Committee, the reports are also adopted by Parliament. The same problem I was mentioning earlier, the problem of implementation. We want a situation where we can see accounting officers who are not able to account for money is confirmed by the Auditor General, either two things to be done. We need to see sanctions. Either they are told that for the next budget, you get your budget less what you have not been able to account for, or the other thing, the appointing authority then gets them out of office so that we have new officers who can take care of the money. The other thing we need to do, because this is purely corruption, it's just purely corruption. You see, money is being not used as expected. So the Auditor General has been saying, Parliament, can you now take up and implement my recommendations after you adopt them? And that's the challenge. We see a gap between parliamentary recommendations and implementation of the recommendations. And if you go to that stage, I think we'll be making the right step. The other thing we need to do is, when we are budgeting, we need to make sure that we come up with the right priorities. We have always been talking about zero-based budgeting. Zero-based budgeting, Gladys, means anytime we are doing a budget, you have a plain sheet of paper, written nothing. So if salaries have to get themselves to that paper, you justify why you need that money. So you'll be saying, I have this number of employees, I pay them this salary per month, so on that night I need 100 million. So we write you 100 million. So that by doing that, we'll be getting justification for every item into the budget. If we go that direction, then we will ensure that we have good prioritization of our needs, and in that case, we'll have the best outcomes out of our budget. And by doing that, we will grow our economy. If you look at Vision 2030, the target was we grow this economy 10% every year. Where are we now today? This year, we have been at 4.6. Last year, we are about 5.2. So we have dropped. Now, the projection the coming year is about 5.4, but I can tell you for sure, from my analysis, I see us eating around either 4.8 or 4.9, because you look at the external factors which determine the growth. So we are saying really, there are a few things we must fix as a country if we get it right. And it's not nuclear science. These are things which are known, this can be done, and what we require is we require, first of all, political goodwill. So that if I'm an accounting officer, and I've been confirmed with the Auditor General that I've not applied resources well, public resources well, then can we take that chance, either step out, or my budget will be reduced by the same, so that the next budget, I'll work hard so that I recover my higher figure. By doing that, we'll be sorting out issues. The other issues is...
I have heard from the Auditor General
yes.
appearing before a number of committees
yes.
and highlighting misuse of funds
yes.
by various state agencies.
Yes.
Now, I think I've also heard from a section of lawmakers
yes.
Saying the moment, say, county governments do not appear before their committees, and
yes.
there has been misappropriation of funds amounting to even billions of shillings.
Yes.
There has been these recommendations or mulling around writing the control of budget for the control of budget not to release funds.
Yes.
So you've spoken about the aspect of Parliament putting its foot down.
Yes.
Why have we not seen the National Assembly and the Senate taking that requisite action of doing exactly that, instead of saying we need to doing exactly that, so that we can curtail the aspect of having state agencies misuse monies and nothing is done to the culprits?
Now, what has happened, constitutionally, Kenya has two layers of government. We have the national government and we have the county governments. By design, the county government are supposed to be oversighted by the county assemblies. And the national government oversighted by the parliament, the national assembly. Now, that being the case, you realize that the same problem we are facing is more like the same problems the county assemblies are facing, that they would make recommendations, but they're never implemented. So what I'm imagining is, if we stamp our authority as an assembly, that should be able to be cascaded down to the county assemblies. Because even by design, we are supposed to be actually a replica of each other. That what we do at the national level is what they are doing at the county government. Yes. And I must agree with you. Even the same Auditor General has confirmed that counties are also not applying resources as expected. So none of the levels of government we can say is doing better. And for us to do better, then we need a system which ensures that anybody in charge of public resources uses them prudently as expected in the Constitution. And by doing that, Gladys, I can tell you, some of the simple problems we have in this country, we can sort them out by just taking administrative actions. And then, because Kenya, from where I sit, is a very rich country, very resilient economy. This economy is being stolen left, right, and it is still standing. I'm telling you, if it was another economy, it would have died. But it's still standing. That being the case, we want just to improve our administrative actions, and so that when I'm appointed to a position of authority as Makali Mulu, I know that this position of authority is a position which also requires responsibility and accountability. And if I'm not accountable, then I don't qualify to be in that position. If we go that direction, Gladys, I tell you for sure, I would love to be a Kenyan because this country is rich.
You should love to be a Kenyan every other time.
Yes.
But Honorable Makali Mulu, CS Mbadi is expected in a few minutes to be in Parliament buildings.
Yes.
This is a cabinet secretary who has spoken, who has been very outspoken about the aspect of taxations, increase of taxation and introduction of new taxes. The budget process began, say, a year ago. Parliament has been going through that process
through the
since,
motions.
Yes, through the budget estimates, through the circulars from the treasury. And I would want to understand from you, from how you have interacted with this process, up to this point, where the CS is set to read the highlights this afternoon. Should Kenyans expect probably introduction of new taxes, having heard from a cabinet secretary who is championing that the government agenda for the time being is not introduction of new taxes, rather than it is about sealing the loopholes?
No, actually what has happened, the last finance bill, which was rejected, was projected to collect about 360 billion. And that's why Kenyans were up in arms and it could not be implemented. So this particular financial bill targets only to collect about 24 billion. And we must give it to the cabinet secretary that in the current finance bill, there isn't much taxation in it. What they have done, they are looking at collecting more resources through the A&A. That is, the e-citizen arrangement. So that's why they think they'll collect more resources, which might breach the gap in terms of, so in terms of additional taxation, there isn't much as was expected. Actually, what has happened, because we must also be fair to the process, is that the cabinet secretary has tried to put more money into the pockets of pensioners. What they have done is they have decided to remove end taxation on pension payments and gratuity payment. So it means the senior citizens of this country will not be paying tax when they are getting their pension. And that is likely to add them some additional shillings into their pocket, which can be used to buy goods and services. So that's a good move. The other thing which they have done, and I think is also good for the country, is what they have done, like now when you are paying your tax reliefs, they would normally get the gross salary, calculate the payee, and then get the reliefs. They have now said gross salary, get all the reliefs, and then calculate the payee. That is like to add to you either 1,000 or 500 shillings to your pocket. It's not much money. But all said and done, I think it's a move to the right direction. But what we are saying as economists ourselves is that if we really want to grow this economy, we must get a way of putting money to the pockets of Kenyans. And that's why I like things like Kasi Mtaani, because it has a direct injection to the pocket of a Kenyan. What that will do is it will trigger some economic activity. People will buy goods and services, And by doing that, it will encourage more production, more employment, and that has a ripple effect whereby even so long as more people are employed, then you have a chances of collecting more income tax. So the secret is put more money to the Kenyan pockets, and then by doing that, other positive moves will come, which will grow our economy.
My other question would be what happened during the Committee of Supply?
Yes.
And my issue with Parliament would be not an issue per se, but we have attended a number of committees where the CS, the PS for basic education, lamented about the aspect of school capitation coming down. And we understand there are a number of amendments that happened at the Committee of Supply. Could you please take us through what exactly happened, what areas are likely to see an increment of some allocation?
Now, what has happened, despite the education sector taking the lion's share of the budget, because they have taken 702 billion, which is about 28% of the budget, there are still huge gaps. And you realize that from the word go, they are not factored in the examination fee. So as a budget committee, we had to look for resources to factor in that. So the budget committee was able to, I think, to get about 5.8 billion to take care of the examination fee. Issues of capitation, issues of additional teachers has not been addressed yet. So we are only able to factor in for that particular area examination fee. For the health sector, we were able to factor in some money to take care of the UHC employees so that they start being employed on a permanent and pensionable basis. And you have seen them daily outside here. So those are the two areas the budget committee was able to look at. I can see the education sector still has huge gaps, more so in capitation at primary school, capitation at secondary, JSS, and then the universities. And this is a challenge. So we are saying, if we are able to get more resources as a country, I think the education sector needs to be given more resources so that we stabilize that sector, and each one of us knows what the education sector does to an economy if it's properly managed.
Besides the education sector, Honorable Makali, what are some of the likely big winners in this budget, and the allocation of the monies that have been done to every other department that will be taking home a huge chunk of this cake?
Yes.
What is the rationale behind that allocation?
What has happened, and that's why the people are, that's why, you know, the way we do the budget is when the budget is tabled in the House, it's normally taken to the departmental committees. Departmental committees are the committees which oversight specific ministries. Like if it's Minister of Health, they would go and sit with the Departmental Committee on Health and get into details of the budget to find out what needs to be here and what needs to be not here. So I do believe our departmental committees did a good job in identifying what needs to go to the budget. And that's what I was saying, where I sit as a budget expert, I still think there's some room for improvement so that they don't really, some things which are still in the budget could easily be reduced and still achieve the same outcomes. But as you said, you realize that most of the programs and activities which have found themselves in the budget have been justified at the departmental committee level. So when they came to us, it's only obvious omissions like what we are saying, examination fee and things like UHSC stuff, where we had to intervene as a budget committee and say, even though this is the case, we need to look for money to take care of this. But basically, these things were justified at the committee level, and us as a committee, we took it over, and we look forward to the same things being presented, because that's what informs the CSC's statement today.
I think I'm almost to my last question, and we have spoken about the aspect of the private sector.
Yes.
And the borrowing externally, between the government borrowing externally and disadvantaging the local creditors, so to speak. And when you look at this issue, it ties to the aspect of pending bills. And one of the things I, as a Kenyan, would be expecting to understand from the CS for Treasury, how do we plan to work on reducing or totally solving, clearing the pending bills? So what is your expectation? And probably from having come from a critical committee, do you probably have some insights on how we need to address this issue, bearing in mind that a majority of business owners are choking when it comes to the aspect of pending bills, because you do business, but you cannot do the next business because your previous funds have not been settled. How do we need to address that as a country?
No, this is what I want to say. Basically, the issue of pending bills is a big issue in this country. And I want to assure Kenyans that even as the budget is coming up here, I don't want to cheat them that we have enough money to clear out the pending bills. So what the government has done, there is this process they call verification process, where they get a task force to look at the bills. And to me, I think that's just a way of trying to delay the process. What we have said, and this is not our saying, it is a requirement by the Public Finance Management Act that clearing of pending bills should be a first charge, as you do. You should not plan for anything new before you plan for clearing what people owe you. And that being the principle, it's unfortunate that we are actually killing our small-scale business people by not paying them when they are already supplied goods and services to the government. So our appeal as a budget committee, we have said, this is an item we are taking very seriously, and we want to see as much as possible government clearing opening bills. And it is to the advantage of this economy to do that. Because by clearing those bills, as you said earlier, the same institutions or enterprises will be able to produce more, and production of more means employing more people, and then it will trigger many economic activities, which are good for our economic growth. Yes.
I don't think there's any budget that has been read for the last few years that I've covered Parliament that I do not see some sort of revenue measures gearing towards taxes. So when the government is looking at raising monies to fund its budget, taxes will have to come, yeah? Either an increase or sealing of the loopholes. Mm-hmm. My question would be to you, Honorable Makali, do you think any introduction of new taxes, increase of new taxes is justifiable under this kind of economic climate change?
Where we are today, I think the direction the CS Treasury has taken is the right direction, that there should be no additional taxes to any Kenyan. Because from economic theory, there is something called the reverse curve theory, which means there's a level you reach where if you increase the tax rates, you actually collect less. Because what normally happens is, by increasing the tax rate beyond that level, people start thinking about tax evasion. So, for example, I would be thinking, what do I do to make sure that I don't pay tax? That's one way. The other thing, which happens when you go beyond that level, people start thinking about alternatives. Being rational human beings, people will think, if I'm now consuming meat, and I can't afford meat because of the money I have, what other alternative can I eat? Give me the same product when I eat meat, but still be cheaper. And that's what happens. So that if you had taxed meat higher, people will not stop eating meat and eat the alternative, and by that you collect less from the meat. So where we are now, and with the kind level of disposable income in our pockets, Kenyan pockets, I think this is not the time to increase tax rates. This is the time to think about how do we broaden the tax base so that more people come in, and how do we ensure that the little we are collecting, there are no leakages. If we do that, we'll be able to collect the same amount, even more, but not taxing Kenyans more. So I'm saying, if I were the finance minister today, I would not be thinking about taxing more. I would be thinking about how do I bring more people to the tax bracket, and how do I make sure that the little I'm collecting, there are no leakages. It has been reported many times that through KRA, we are experiencing a lot of leakages. So we need to seal those leakages so that whatever is collected gets to the government consolidated fund, and then the additional taxation comes from the additional members who are paying taxes, and we'll have more resources to spend to serve our people.
The 4.2 trillion shillings that you are budgeting for, my last question to you would be its reflection on the cost of living of Kenyans, because that is what every other Kenyan really cares about. And this budget comes at a time, even when the economy is seemingly recovering, Kenyans are still feeling a pinch of the economic situation.
Mm. So what I would say is the whole idea of the budget is to improve the lives of Kenyans. But it will only become a reality if the budget is implemented. In the past, we have faced challenges in budget implementation because of what I was saying earlier. And I see that happening even this year, that even though we have the budget, we are not likely to implement the budget as proposed. There is this Article 223, which has become a nuisance in this country, where we get the government spending money before coming to Parliament. And it has become a major, that's another area I wish we could improve on, so that we spend the budget as planned and approved by the House. By doing that, then we'll be able to deliver to Kenyans what we have planned. But if we address the things I was saying earlier, so that we implement the budget, I can assure you, Gladys, this budget will be helping Kenyans to get out of where they are, because Kenyans are suffering. It's not a secret, and we need to do all what it takes. This government needs to do what it takes to improve the lives of Kenyans by doing better, delivering the right programs, either in the education sector, in the health sector, and the normal economic activities, because it is the empowerment programs which push more money to the pockets of Kenyans. And that's where we should be focusing. And I like the idea of value addition. How I wish that we spend more resources on value addition so that Kenyans get that money and use the money to develop our country.
I would have asked so much more, but I'm told by my director, Tam is not on our side. So kindly, Honorable Makali Mulu, thank you so very much for spending time with the Parliamentary Broadcasting Unit in Parliament to shed more light in regards to the budget. And we appreciate you over and over again. Thank you so much. We'll be waiting to hear from the CS, you and I, as well as other Kenyans. Thank you very much, our dear viewers, for having also spent some of your time to get to hear from our experts here at our studio in Parliament. Earlier on, you are engaging my colleague Kamche Menza and the budget chair, that is Samuel Atandi, on matters budget. And any moment from now, we expect to hear from the CS for the National Treasury, Honorable John Badi, in regards to the highlights of the 2025-2026 financial year. Allow me to leave it there for now, but in a few minutes, I will be bringing you some of the highlights in regards to this day when the CS for the National Treasury is expected to deliver this budget. My name is Gladys Mungai. Bye-bye for now.